Hey guys, today I want to share with you what I'm using on my electric mountain bikes for the drivetrain. You know, basically most of these modern e-bikes come with an 11 or 12 speed setup for the drivetrain. Many of them are electronic, but I'm sort of going against the grain here and I want to share that with you. What I've got is a 9-speed drivetrain. It's all manual shifting, no electronics. And what I've done is I have selected different bits and parts from different manufacturers to build what I think is a very reliable, inexpensive drivetrain that's very easy to work on and where parts are readily available. So to show you what it looks like on a bike, I have a Deore M5100 Derailleur, an 11 by 46 HG 9-speed cassette, a KMC chain, and a Decas 104 BCD 32 tooth chainring. So, like I said, I want to share the details of that, so let's get to it. Like I said, guys, I want to share with you the drivetrain that I'm currently using on most of my electric mountain bikes. And, you know, basically, I believe this eMTB drivetrain is worth considering. And what I have here, these are the pictures of them. And I have a Box 2, a 9-speed shifter, a Deore, a Shimano Deore M5100 derailleur. I'm using a KMC X9 chain, and I'm using an 11 by 46 HG cassette. And for the chainring, I'm using a Decas, Decas 104 BCD 32 tooth chainring. And when you buy all of these, the total cost to have them tags delivered is around $147. So you're a very inexpensive drivetrain, but it performs really well. Now, my criteria for evaluating this drivetrain and recommending it are really 6 factors. You know, first of all is the cost, which I've gone over, and the cost for this is very low, very inexpensive. The second thing is availability, and basically all the parts for this drivetrain are very easy to find, readily available all over the internet, at local bike shops, no problem at all getting parts for this. The third thing is how easy is it to adjust and repair it. And what I found is that because all of these parts and all of these items are traditional, conventional, tried and true parts, they're easy to work on, easy to understand, easy to adjust. The fourth thing is the durability. How long will it last? And I'll have to say this is the weak point in my drivetrain setup. It does not last the longest of any drivetrain that I've had, primarily because the front chainring that I have is an aluminum chainring, and it will wear out relatively quickly. And the chain, you know, is not the strongest in an e-bike situation, so it does wear out. And so the durability is an issue with this drivetrain, but if you monitor it and because of the cost, I think it offsets the durability issue. And number 5, how does it perform? And in my experience, this setup performs very well, particularly on a Class 1 e-bike. And I'll go into some of the gearing and why I believe it performs well on the bike. Now, there are other options in this market. I'm showing here a SRAM Eagle NX. It's about $275, which would probably be a comparable drivetrain setup. I do not I've used this setup on e-bikes. The thing that I really don't like, I feel like it just has too many gears, and the parts, particularly the the chain and the cassette, are, in my opinion, relatively expensive to replace. Another option is the Shimano SLX M7100 group set. about $200, a relatively cheap option, performs very well. I'm actually using or have used the Derailleur out of this group set in my drivetrain, works very well. But again, it's an 11 or 12 speed setup and more gears than I want. And the parts are, as you wear them out, are relatively expensive to replace. Another option here is the Microshift Advent X, about $150 for the derailleur, the cassette, and the shifter. I've never tried this. I ruled it out just because it was very proprietary, and I was concerned about being locked in with Microshift and having to always use their parts. A recent addition, and I would say early in 2023, Shimano came out with the CUES, C-U-E-S, and one of the options in the CUES system is the U4000, which is a 9-speed setup, and it goes for around $150 for this group set. I did not or have not changed to the CUES just because it's been a little bit unclear to me as to compatibility issues. And at this point, I believe you're probably locked in to only being able to get the parts through Shimano, and normally that ultimately leads to more expensive part replacements and sometimes availability issues. So these are other options, but I've not gone with those for the reasons I mentioned. Now, in looking at the detail items on the cost, I'm showing one-time cost here and recurring cost to sort of break them up. For the Box 2 9-speed shifter is a little over $30 when you consider the cost of the item and the shipping. The Deore 5100 derailleur is just under $40. So the cost for the shifter and the derailleur is about $74. I found that every 500 miles, typically I'm replacing the chain and the chainring. Those two items together are a little bit over $31. And then about every 1,000 miles, I'm replacing the cassette, and the cassette can be purchased for just under $30 when it's purchased. The recurring items come in at about $60, so the one-time items at about $74, and the $60 plus tax gives you a grand total of $147. Now, I'm using a 9-speed shifter with an 11-speed derailleur, and that might appear that it won't work, but on my experience, the Box 2 9-speed e-bike shifter has the same cable pull ratio as that required by the Shimano 5100 and 6100 rear derailleurs. So you can easily pair the Box 2 shifter with those Shimano derailleurs and maybe other Shimano derailleurs. I'm not sure if they'll work in the CUES derailleurs, probably not, but anyway, it does work with the M5100 and the 6100. Also, the Box 2 shifter comes with a single shift version. I think that's ideal, and that's the one I use on my e-bikes. It's just much less likely to put an undue amount of stress on the chain and the chain ring and the cassette when shifting. And also the Box 2 shifter can be shifted up by either pushing or pulling as a part of the upshift, which is similar to a Shimano shifter. And I like having that option on the handlebars. So the 9-speed shifter does work with the 11-speed derailleur no problem in my experience. This is just a picture of an eBay listing for the shifter, and as you can see, you could buy it now a couple of days ago for $29.95, and it had a shipping charge of $3.95. So that shifter, can be had, under $35 on eBay. Also on eBay, I found this listing for a Shimano Deore 5100 derailleur, $40, a little under $40. And so those items are available. One thing that's important, and I'll highlight this again, but on this derailleur, when you install it on your bike, you have to put the derailleur hanger or tighten the derailleur to the hanger at 8 to 10 Newton meters to ensure proper consistent shifting. if you don't have it tight enough, it'll come loose. And as it comes loose, the shifting in the bike will be affected. So very important if you're using this derailleur to make sure that it's tightened at the proper torque. The chain, here's a listing for a chain from Worldwide Cyclery, $25. One word of caution, and I think this goes for any chain. Don't buy any chains off the internet unless they are from a authorized dealer of those chains. What I'm seeing is a lot of counterfeit chains, particularly out on some of the auction websites. So I'm showing a listing I would only buy from someone like Worldwide Cyclery, or once again, an authorized dealer. And you can get this chain for $25 on Worldwide Cyclery, which is not a bad price for that. On the Chainring, I'm purchasing those off AliExpress. Here's a listing for a Decas 104 BCD chainring. Got a price for the round black one. It does have other colors available. $6.33. Shipping's free. So those are plentiful and readily available on AliExpress. It does take about a month to get it, but if the lead time's not a big deal, you can go ahead and purchase it before you need it because the price is so low. And then again on AliExpress, here's a listing for an 11 by 46 9-speed HG cassette. The price $25.96, shipping $257. Note that this is an HG free hub, or it works with an HG free hub, so you have to have an HG free hub to use this cassette. But those are the listings, so you can see where I'm getting the parts, specifically where I'm getting them, and you can see the going prices and can see that they're readily available. Going into some details on the ease of adjustment and repair. Once again, I want to highlight a couple of things here, but the first thing to highlight is that in this setup, it's very important that derailleur is tightened to the derailleur hanger at 8 to 10 Newton meters. If it's tightened at anything less than that, it will come loose, and it will even come loose at 8 to 10 Newton meters. You need to check that and make sure it stays tight. If you do keep it tight, it works great. But if it gets loose, suddenly the shifting becomes very poor on it. So just be aware of that. The derailleur itself has your typical adjustments. It has an upper and a lower limit screw. It also has a B screw, and it has a clutch, which can be adjusted on it. So, that's very typical with derailleurs that have been out there ever since I've been cycling, which is a long time. And, they all work basically the same way. So, the adjustments on the derailleur are very easy to work with and been around a long time. The shifter has the barrel cable tension adjuster, just like most setups, and that works very well. There's, it has plenty of clicks, plenty of adjustments, so it's very easy to set up the derailleur and the shifter so that it, will work on there. This is, not one of the new items like the SRAM transmission. You do have a derailleur hanger on the bike that the derailleur attaches to, and you need to make sure that the derailleur hanger stays in alignment. Once again, if you've been working on bikes for any period of time, you're aware that you need to every once in a while true up the alignment of the derailleur hanger, and you have to do it with this setup. It's very easy to change the cassette, but you must remove the rear wheel, and you must have something like the Park Tool FR 5.2 or similar tool. And I showed a picture of this over here. I think, once again, this is a fairly common tool. For changing the chain ring, I found that you only need to remove the chain and have something similar to a Park Tool CNW-2 or similar tool to change the chain ring bolts, but very easy to get to and very manageable to change on the bike. The seventh item I have here, if anything breaks, it's easy and cheap to replace. So, I rate it pretty highly in terms of ease of adjustment and repair. How durable is the thing? Well, in my experience, the chain ring will wear out relatively quickly, but normally it'll last about as long as the chain. So the once again, the chain ring is an aluminum chain ring, and it does get eaten up, and you do have to replace it. Also, the chain does not last as long as mid to upper end group sets. So, for example, a chain that comes with the SRAM NX group set would last much longer than this KMC X9 chain. In my experience, and I have about between 3,000 and 4,000 miles between all my bikes using this setup. And I found the life of the chain and the chain ring are roughly 500 miles. So, that's about how long it lasts. I wouldn't use this setup unless you're going to do two things. And one, you have to regularly monitor the chain wear. And two, you must replace the chain and chain ring as soon as the chain checker tool pushes in at 0.75. And over here, I'm showing what a chain checker tool looks like. And then the very end of that tool I've shown right here. And if you can push it in at the 0.75, well, then it's time to replace the chain. And I just go ahead and replace the chain and the chain ring at the same time. The life of the cassette will really depend on how religious you are about following number 4 above. But generally, the cassette will last as long as 2 or 3 chains. So you'll get 1,000 to 1,500 miles on the cassette. Now, another item about durability, the HG hubs, especially the alloy hubs, are subject to pitting from the cassette. And if you've ever pulled off a cassette off an HG hub, you know what I'm talking about. But in this particular setup, it's not too bad because this cassette that I'm suggesting here is mostly one piece. I think maybe the bottom, the 11-speed sprocket is separate, but the rest of that cassette is all one piece. And so that, because it's all one piece, it's not as likely to dig into the free hub body. And then number 7, using the 9-speed setup over 3,000 miles on various eMTBs, I've had 1 broken chain ring, 1 broken cassette, and no broken chains. And both the chain ring breaking and the cassette were very early on in the process where I had the bike in a very unusual situation and was putting an undue amount of pressure on the bike and broke the chain ring and the cassette. So those are my comments on durability. Regarding the performance, I tried to give here some gearing speed comparison. This chart's sort of busy, but let me see if I can explain it. On a typical 11 to 12 speed EMT gearing, and this would be, here's a picture of a SRAM NX cassette. The fastest gearing that will allow the bike to go fastest, the front chain ring on most of these modern e-bikes that you purchase, the front chain ring is 34 tooth. And the rear cassette, the smallest sprocket is a 10 tooth sprocket. And if you're pedaling at 80 RPMs per minute, which is your cadence, which is not the fastest, but it's fairly good pace, that bike will be running at about 23 miles an hour, which is 3 miles over the pedal assist on a class 1 e-bike. So in my opinion, you got more than you need there, but anyway, that's where you would be. And then the easiest pedaling, in other words, if the chain was on the largest sprocket with the 34 tooth chain ring and the 50 cassette at 80 RPMs of cadence, you'd be going at 5 miles an hour. On my alternate 9-speed EMT gearing, on the fastest gearing, which once again the chain would be on the 11 tooth sprocket, the front chain ring is 32. And at 80 RPMs of cadence, you'd be going about 20 miles an hour, which is right at the limit on the class 1 motor, which is right where I think you want to be, or that's where I want to be. The easiest gearing, where it's on the 11-speed cassette, the chain ring is at 32, but the rear cassette would be at 46, and your speed at 80 RPMs cadence would be 5. So in my opinion, in terms of how this thing will perform, you've got 9 speeds that are operating between 20 miles an hour and 5 miles an hour, which is exactly what you wanted. And I think that's a better range than you actually would get with the 11 or 12 speed setup with the 10 the 10 tooth rear sprocket and the 50 rear sprocket. So as you can see from this, the performance aspect of this is very good. Just because I think you're in a better range. And generally, my experience has been when I'm riding with my buddies who have these, these more gears. I'm not experiencing where, I need more gears or feel like they've, got something better than I have on my bikes. If anything, I'm, staying right with them, or even in some cases leading the pack. So, I think the gearing, the 9-speed gearing is more than adequate and performs really well on the bike. So in conclusion, I believe that this is an inexpensive option, both for the initial purchase and for ongoing maintenance issues. I think because of the low replacement cost, it makes it easy to have several sort of in your toolkit replacement parts to use as needed. Now, regarding durability, it may not be the best, but I think the durability is good enough. And I think the chainring, chains, and cassettes are plentiful and inexpensive. So even though it doesn't last that long, it's not a big deal because the parts are readily available and they're cheap. And then lastly, I think it performs really well. I think the 9-speed, 9 speeds in an e-bike application is more than adequate and will, perform right at the level, that you need it. So that's what I'm seeing on this drivetrain setup. That's how you get it. That's how I evaluate it. Well, I hope that's given you something to think about. I think you can see from the details that clearly the drivetrain that I'm using is a little bit different from what you would normally see on an electric mountain bike. But once again, in my experience, if I could choose any drivetrain available out there, this is the one that I have and would choose for my electric mountain bikes. I think it really works well. It's very practical, and I would strongly encourage you, if you're looking at a different drivetrain setup, to think about some of the points I've talked about here, and maybe even consider a drivetrain similar to this for your bike. But with that, I'll see you guys at the top.